welcome back to Last Principles. I'm your host, M.A., and today we have a special edition of Cult Conversations. I say special because we got a couple of firsts going on. So, first in-person interview, because, you know, I started doing my processing right before COVID hit, so once I started this channel, it was this year, 2022. So that's a first in person. Second first is, that sounded weird, second first, right? Second first is that, so I have my man Ron Denson Jr. here with me, and he's the first person I'm interviewing who I actually knew during my time at the ICOC. So we go back a little bit, you know, he might be one of my gray hairs right here. Anyway, Ron, how you doing today, man?
Living the dream, sir.
Indeed. So tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself real quick.
So I'm a DC native,
okay.
and had a lot of HBCU folks in my circle of influence who were trying to tell me which school to go to, and I was going off to college, and FAM won the vote, and so I ended up at Florida A&M for college, and I met you down there. And then since then, I actually transferred away from Florida A&M and finished my undergraduate degree at University of Florida, and have been doing health policy for the last several years back up here in DC.
Cool. So we both got indoctrinated at Florida A&M, Florida Agriculture and Mechanical, if I'm getting those words right. That sounds right? Okay, cool.
That's right.
Yeah, we say FAMU so much, I be forgetting what the letters are sometimes. But so let's rewind a little bit, because one thing I think is very important for anybody who has been involved in this, anybody who gets involved in any cult, high control group, anything like that, the person's background, the person's history up to that point often has a big part to play in how they get indoctrinated or why they got indoctrinated. So can you tell us what was going on in your life right before and leading up to your indoctrination there?
So I know we talked about this a little bit before, but I have, even having left unhappy, still don't necessarily view the whole experience as completely negative.
Right.
I think there are things of value from there, just like there are at a lot of churches. But in terms of, to answer your question directly, what was going on, I had come out of a church experience in high school where I had seen a lot of the youth leaders. I'm not even talking about the adults, I'm just talking about the other kids that were put in positions of leadership and being held up as examples of what to be like and what to follow. And like, I hung out with these kids on, like, I'd been to their parties, and I was like, Jeff, really? Him? That's the guy who like is on stage every week? Like, I saw him shotgunning last weekend.
Wow.
But he's up there. So I was just very jaded, and I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I had seen a lot of people just kind of faking their way through it, it seemed to me. And so I was kind of in this place of, well, Christianity is some version of just try to be a nice person and do whatever you do, and just kind of had settled on that. And so when I got to Tallahassee, I started going to church there and that with you. It was the first place that I had been where it seemed to me that everyone was actually doing their best to live the way they were preaching. Okay. And I had never seen that before, and I had done a lot of church shopping growing up with my family, and so it was refreshing to me to see people that were, yes, very conservative, but like also like practicing what they're preaching.
Gotcha.
I hung out with them on the weekends, and they weren't getting drunk. They weren't hooking up with a bunch of people. They weren't cursing people out when they got cut off on the highway. And so that really resonated with me. And they're like, oh, like I was angry about the hypocrisy, and I'm not seeing a bunch of that here.
Gotcha.
So I think that's what was big for me.
Gotcha. So it being a breath of fresh air from the hypocrisy that you experienced before, that's what kind of drew you in.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. You know, it's funny that for those of y'all, if y'all wondering what the background is here, I'm actually in a hotel room in DC. I'm actually here for a comic convention, which is it's funny because that's actually kind of how we met. We met through our shared geekiness. I believe, tell me if this sounds right, I'm in my dorm, I'm walking in the hallway, and I hear this familiar music. I'm like, is somebody playing Final Fantasy IX in the room? Wait, no. Okay, no. I heard that, and I don't think I knocked on your door, and I think you came to a Bible talk that I had in my dorm room late, because I think you not chastise you for being late, but I do remember you knocking. I remember you knocking on the door after it was over, and then once you told me what room you were in, I'm like, you that dude, you the one who was playing Final Fantasy IX. So yeah, that's. Was that all correct? Did I remember all that right?
I had forgotten about that. I did have that game. I forgot about that part, but you're 100% right. I saw there was a sign on your door for a Bible study at like 7 o'clock, and someone knocked on the door, and it was just a couple of the leaders just hanging out after the study. And I don't remember what exactly the timeline of everything that happened after that, but
yeah, that's how it happened. Cool. So tell me so you came to Bible Talk, and I guess you must have come out to another Bible Talk or come out to church after that. What was your experience from that moment coming into the Bible Talk to baptism? What was how would you describe your experience from that in that period?
Most of it was a really good experience for me. I think the whole idea of the openness and the profoundness of the conversations that people would have, I found also to be very refreshing. I remember one of the first days that I hung out, there was I don't remember his real name, but everybody called him JC. It was JC's birthday, which I also thought was funny because JC, Jesus Christ. This guy's name was not Jesus Christ, but just thought it was funny. His name was JC. And it was what I didn't know at the time was this was a birthday tradition. But then when it was somebody's birthday, everyone would get in a circle and they would share things they appreciated about the birthday person. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, this is really nice. Like, people are sharing things that are like substantive, and
they actually know this person to be able to share all this good stuff about
them. They're sharing nice things, and not that I got the impression that JC was perfect. It was just the idea that, like, and this is just one example, this birthday example, but there were other times where people would sit around and they would share things that were real. And especially being a dude in this country, like, sitting around and talking about real stuff is just not what you do.
It don't happen,
But it was something that I very much appreciated. And so I loved that, seeing that. Some of the negative things were things that, for example, I was in a Bible study once, and the leader of the Bible study at the time, like, more or less, like, without even having known or met her, was like, well, there's lots of people in your family, even your grandmother, are not Christians. And I'm like,
I remember this one
vividly. You don't even know my grandma, sir. Like, because it was almost a fight. Like,
you're right. I think we were in the one of the rooms
in the church basement, I think.
Right. Yeah. So for those of y'all who don't know, if you're former ICOC, something that is not par for the course is we actually had a legit brick and mortar building that we met in. You know, most of us that's what we started in. But I didn't know that most other branches of the church, like, would just rent out different, they might be in a hotel like this and rent out a ballroom for service or whatever like that. So I think we were in one of the rooms that they had Kingdom Kids in or something like that. And I remember I was like, dang, they going for this man, grandmama.
Well, and what ended up happening was multiple situations like that. Not that I was trying to throw hands with everybody that I had a Bible study in disagreement with, but when there was something that was said to me that did not sit well with me, what I always did was I would go talk to some of the old heads in the church and ask them very explicitly, like, yo, this dude told me that without having met he doesn't know her, he doesn't know me, without having met, he's saying she's not a Christian. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And I got really good and reasonable explanations from people who I viewed as very knowledgeable and trustworthy. in the church context, they were also called elders.
Yeah,
Some of them,
yeah.
not all of them. And I to me, there is value in that. So when with the advice and kind of explanations that I got from them made a lot more sense to me, and were very easy for me to accept.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I still. My mind keeps going back to that. I was just like, man, this. I don't know. Because again, if you
didn't actually swing on anybody. let's get that clear.
Right. Because like if you're studying the Bible with somebody and they hit a roadblock like that, for those of us who are deep in it and deeply indoctrinated in it, our thought is, man, this man ain't gonna make it. They tell him that they saying his mama going to saying his grandmama going to hell. I don't think he's gonna stay.
Yeah. Well, and here's some people just did not have a good temperament, and that guy, I'm not gonna say his name. But that guy in particular did not have the type of temperament to deal with folks who may have been maybe in a spiritual crisis.
Yeah.
Because I was very interested in learning more about taking my Christianity seriously. And so it wasn't a hard sell to try to get me to study a Bible.
Right.
The hard sell was for me to to take it deeper than a superficial level and to go in on family was just that's not how you convince people to come to church, by going in on their family.
There was a different way to handle that, and he didn't know. He didn't have nuance. Didn't have let me not. It's like the people that don't know the difference between coddling and sugarcoating versus just saying something in a kind manner. They're not mutually exclusive. Like you can tell somebody something kindly while also not sugarcoating and coddling and blah 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 blah. So I feel like that person, and if I'm remembering properly, just didn't grasp that.
Absolutely. You can, to use a church phrase, you can tell the truth in love, and that is not what happened in some of these circumstances.
I'm just laughing because so many times people would say, "Oh, I'm just telling the truth in love." Are you? Because some people think just because they're saying I'm telling the truth in love, that automatically makes it so. I'm like, not quite. All right, so that was a hang up there. Yeah. You eventually made it through. What got you to push through past the? Well, I think you said that, or you talked to the elders, the people you felt like had a good wise grasp on things, and that kind of
absolutely
chilled it out a little bit, I guess.
Absolutely, and those folks did what I think is a good job of saying like look, I'm not gonna lie to you. There are some people here that think they're telling the truth in love and they're not.
Right.
And there's a way of going about helping them learn better. And so just just a specific example based off the story that we just talked about. But absolutely, that's what would happen. Is I would go and I would speak to some people, and if it wasn't for those conversations that I had, I definitely wouldn't have stayed, because there were certainly a number of things that rubbed me the wrong way, that were like, this is grounds for me just leaving. But I was so interested in the relationships that I had seen, and I do mean that in the most platonic way possible. The JC story I told, and people really sharing about their lives in a serious way. I loved that, and so I wanted to be a part of that. It was a struggle to reconcile some of the teaching that I was receiving, coupled with the relationships that people in the congregation have with one another.
Gotcha. You read my mind a bit, because I was just about to ask, what other red flags did you see, if any, while you were studying the Bible? Like, what were some of the things you were like, this is grounds for being out?
I mean, for me, honestly, I think maybe because both my parents were in the military for a while, it's not just a regimented whatever, just didn't bother me really. It made sense. There's every rule that has ever existed anywhere exists for a reason.
Right.
They print on the back of slip and slides, do not put on concrete, because some fool somewhere put a slip and slide on concrete. Like it's not just people at Hasbro, whoever makes.
And it's not the baby or the kid's responsibility to know, oh, I shouldn't go slip and slide on the concrete.
Right. Like, so they print that on there for a reason. So all the rules that were in place, if there was a rule I didn't like, I would ask about it, and then some of the people that I trusted would give me an answer that was fine, and I'm like, okay, well, that's reasonable. I'm gonna operate going forward with that idea in mind, and then if anybody challenges me on it, we're like, well, yo, like, I spoke to a couple elders, and this is what they told me, so you can go holler at them if you got a problem with what I'm saying on this.
Yeah.
So there weren't a lot of red flags really for me in the beginning. There were things that other people that maybe I would bring to visit or that I got to know there that weren't there that long that were red flags to them, and then I would give them my perspective on it, and they weren't satisfied, and that's okay. Every church isn't for everybody, but honestly, there weren't really a whole lot of red flags for me. There were things I didn't like.
Yeah.
But I told you I didn't go to church shopping growing up. And so every church I'd ever been to had things I didn't like. As a matter of fact, the guy who I almost threw hands with, the one thing he said that I appreciate, that I took away, because even a broken clock is right twice a day, he told me, which is, you probably remember, if you ever find a perfect church, don't join it, because you'll ruin it.
Yeah.
And years later, I added, just for emphasis, that because the perfect church is full of imperfect people.
Right.
And so I do believe to this day that that's true. That there's no such thing as a perfect church. If you want to go to a church that doesn't have gossip at it, don't go to church. Find it. You're not gonna. You're not gonna find a church where there's nobody gossiping. Like, exactly. Good luck. So like, and that's not an ICOC specific thing. I can't count how many churches I've been to, and every single one that I've been to for a significant period of time, as in like not just as a visitor, for sure there's going to be gossip there. I think that's human nature to some pockets of the church to give into that. Gotcha. So not a lot of red flags in the beginning for me.
Okay, cool. So made it through the studies, got baptized. So walk me through. I know I was there for pretty much the first year of it. I know some things I remember, some things I'm not.
How dare you?
Right? How long ago? 2001? 2002?
1989.
I still had my waves. I didn't have this. I was about 50 pounds lighter. Damn. Give me some highlights and some lowlights from that first year.
That's a difficult one to answer. I honestly, I had to think about it for a second because I don't want to just make something up.
No, tell me if you remember this. Encouragement dating. I think I specifically remember you.
Oh, I railed against that quite a bit.
Yes. You wanted to call it just hanging out, and a certain person, I believe he was discipling me at the time, just would not let go of the fact that you were willing to go on the dates but didn't want to call them dates.
Oh yeah, like the entire time I was at the ICOC, I refused to call something a date if there wasn't a romantic interest. I refused to do it.
And you were willing to do them.
Oh yeah.
And you
well, the idea behind an encouragement date makes total sense. And again, like we talked about, there's a reason for every rule. And this wasn't necessarily a rule so much as it was a very strongly encouraged guideline. Strongly encouraged. But it wasn't a rule, I know, pun intended. But yeah, the idea made total sense to me. If you're a person who struggles to get any attention from the opposite sex and you want some,
that's what drew me in. I was like, I don't get no play from nobody.
And you want some, it's just attention.
Yeah.
This to me, like, this is a nice safe way, because it's always double date, so it's not just you and this other person.
Right.
You ask them out, and they can still say no. Yeah. So it's not like an enforced.
At least we thought they could say no.
I was never a woman in this church context, so I can't say for sure. But what I can say for sure is that the people that I did ask out on quote-unquote encouragement dates were people that I was genuinely interested in as a person. And so it was always evident from the get-go. They're like, it's not a date. I like you. I don't want to date you, but I like you. There's no reason why we can't hang out. Like if this was a non-church relationship, and like, I met you in one of my classes on campus, we could still hang out.
Yeah.
And generally, it would be in a group context anyway.
Yeah.
If I'm not romantically interested in you, I'm not trying to confuse you or lead you on by asking you to meet up one-on-one. So the fact that all the dates were double dates anyway was just, everybody knows what it is. Nobody's being led on.
Right.
And then like you don't have to be like home bored on a Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah. Which
I think, like, so I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for anybody else. But for me, there was always, I didn't have a lot of friends. My freshman year, like close friends. And so, you know, there were definitely times where when I wasn't going on dates, it was just me in my dorm room playing PlayStation.
Yeah.
Until I went to bed. Like, going to bed sad because I don't have nothing to do. I ain't got no money.
Yeah.
Definitely not going on a date because I don't have money to spend.
Right.
So I do think it was like great for camaraderie.
Yeah.
It was good to get some attention, like from the opposite sex if that's what you're looking for, and in a safe way where you don't feel. Let me speak for myself. Don't feel like something has to happen from this.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it was just funny that like there was just so much emphasis put on calling it that particular thing. And I know it happened.
Stupid.
It happened afterwards too. It was like because I know there were some sisters who were like, "Hey, can't we just call it a hangout?" Because they didn't want the pressure of it being called a date. And then there were other sisters on the other extreme of that. And I'm speaking of an instance that I know of. This is way past the letter. This is like late 2000, early 2010, something like that. And I remember a sister kind of complaining to me about. She's like, this brother wants to get to know me and he's not trying to take me on a date. Like the brother just trying to hang out with her and not take her on a date. So I'm just like, so I saw both ends of the spectrum there. But yeah, it was always so crazy to me that there was so much emphasis on, it's got to be called a date. It's got to be called a date. Like,
yeah. So I firmly believe that words have power.
Yeah.
And to me, like I do think there's a difference between being kind of obnoxiously pedantic versus being intentional about what we're calling things and how we're using language. And I think that's very important. And I think in English there are only two definitions to date, at least off the top of my head. And one of them is a time and a day on the calendar.
Yeah.
That's a date.
Yeah.
And then to go out with the prospect of growing a romantic relationship with another person.
Yeah.
That is also a date. And then there's the food on the tree.
Right.
So if there's another definition, like I'm sure somebody will say something in the comments. Right. But
somebody will do it, yeah.
But off the top of my head, those are the definitions of date. And to go out with somebody in a platonic manner is not a date, and I refuse to call it that on principle, because I think it's very important to me to be clear about what we're doing. And that's why one of the reasons why I chose to put that plant that flag on that issue.
Yeah, a certain someone called you prideful for saying that, whereas what I knew, and I mean even your explanation now cements my thought that you were being prideful. You were being deliberate and intentional about the phrasing, as opposed to being petty and what's another word? As opposed to just being petty about the names. Like you weren't doing it just for the sake of, it's got to be called this instead of that. Like it was you're being deliberate and intentional about, like, hey, this is what this actually means, so why are we calling it that?
Yeah, because I very well could have just said, well, I'm not going out even platonically with anybody.
Right.
But if you had come up to me and said, yo, I got a date planned for Saturday, I need a double, would you mind like being the double? I'm like, yeah, sure. Like I'll holler at somebody that I just like to hang out with.
Right.
It is like if I don't have a romantic interest.
You do randoms basically.
I don't remember if I did, to be honest with you. Back in Tallahassee, like I had so few resources. I didn't have. Like I legit. I like when I say I didn't have any money, I mean I would have been in bad shape if I had been in the same financial circumstances but not been in college.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'd have been in bad shape.
Yeah.
Like,
man. Won't we all?
Yeah.
All right. So tell me, like, so how long did you stay? I forget. Cause 2001 until.
Man, I was actually there off and on until 2012.
Until 2012. Mm-hmm. So you say off and on. What would cause those offs?
So the first off was 2005, I think 2006, somewhere in the 2000 odds. And in this very specific circumstance, what happened was I transferred schools, and a lot of the incoming freshmen and transfers knew each other. There's a name for those cats that grew up going to ICOC. I forget what they were called. What was like the colloquial name for them?
Wait, say it again.
Kids that grew up in the ICOC.
Oh, Kingdom Kids.
Is that what they were called?
I
thought that was just the name of children's church.
I think it was both. Kind of similar to how like a Bible talk was both a meeting and a small group. I think a Kingdom Kids, like it was the church service for the kids downstairs while everybody else, all the adults were having a church. But Kingdom Kid was also someone who grew up in a church. They were the child of someone who was a member, I think. Yeah,
you might be right. I thought there was a different thing that they called themselves and everybody called them. I can't remember. But the cohort of people that had started going into Gainesville Church, the Gainesville Church, the same time as me, I was easily 80% of them all knew each other.
Yeah.
So they had standing relationships from having known each other throughout high school, sometimes even further back than that. And I told you one of the things I really loved about the church in Tallahassee was the relationships that I was able to build, and I was able to see people really do a good job of like also trying to pull new people in.
Yeah.
That was not the case when I was in Gainesville. And like Jordan, I took that personally.
As you're sitting in almost the same chair as he said that, and I took that personally.
Yeah, and that had absolutely nothing at all to do with like doctrine issues or dating or whatever. It was like that was solidly half of it. The half of it was I want to like people are hanging out. I want to hang out too.
Right.
Like I live with half of y'all. Like at the time I lived in a house that the pastor owned. That was an overflow house for a fraternity that had lost the house. I'll let you guess why.
Oh, there are plenty of reasons that could have been.
Yeah, a campus fraternity lost the house. So it was overflow. Yeah. So including what we called the big house, and then eventually we called the guest house in the back the outhouse. It had a different name before.
Dang.
I'll tell you later. Between the big house and the outhouse, there are 16 dudes that lived there.
Wow.
So, the 16 dudes that lived in this house, half of them would be going out on Friday, and like they would be like a group hangout. And they were like, well, I don't have anything to do. I want to hang. So eventually, I would start finding other things for myself to do. And by other things to do, I'm not talking about lines of coke,
right?
Or soliciting, sex workers. Right. I'm talking about going to a different Bible study at a different church on Friday night.
Yeah.
And then somebody came up to me one day. Didn't come up to me. I actually initiated this conversation with one of the church leaders at the time. And I said, I actually would like to be more involved and do some more things. And this church leader said to me, well, I've heard from some other people that you've been going and participating in some events at some other churches, and like I think that's a little concerning. And I said immediately to this person, and I hold, I think, a valid argument to this day. So you say you were concerned, but you have never said anything to me.
That was my first thought.
I had to initiate a conversation with you about being more involved and why maybe I wasn't asked to be more involved because I felt like I've already been showing a lot of initiative. And your response to me is, well, I heard from other people X, Y, Z. And the thing you heard from other people is, I was going to Friday night Bible studies at a different church.
Right.
Really?
First of all, heard from other people.
Right.
So why are you not coming to get this from the horse's mouth? Why are you not Why are you not asking me about this? You just gonna hold on to this until I say something?
Yeah. And to me, it was those two things together, where the basically being socially ostracized because I hadn't grown up with everybody that had just come into the city.
Yeah.
Which I'll throw them a bone. 17, 18, 19-year-old college students are not the most aware human beings on the planet. Like, your friends are your friends. You want to hang out with your friends. I get that. Like, grown, like, people in their 40s, you gravitate to who you know and what you know. So I get that. So I'll be fair and say I don't think all of it was personal, but it doesn't negate how I felt.
Yeah.
So there's that piece, and then the piece of, I have friends from other churches. I spend time at other church events that aren't this church, and that is somehow like spiritually dangerous.
Right.
Was like, you know what? Like, if that's the case, then maybe this isn't a place that I need to be. So that was the first time I left, and then when that was still in Florida, and then I moved back up here, and I didn't go back to an ICOC church for a while. But I started thinking about it, and so I did. I started going to the Northern Virginia church, and that one was especially, I wasn't sure about that church because Randy McKean is the pastor there, and so I had a very specific sit down with him. And which basically the conversation was, I haven't been to the ICOC in a while. I was like, why? I was like, here are all the reasons why. I was like, okay, well, what are you thinking now? I was like, well, I'm definitely not sure about Northern Virginia church. Why? Well, because you're here.
Yes.
And I was like, and your brother makes me uncomfortable.
Is he an older brother or younger brother? I forget.
I'm not sure, and really, honestly, to me, it doesn't matter. I don't want and have never wanted anything to do with Kip McKean. Even when I had joined the ICC, just I don't want to make this into a bashing other people kind of thing, because I don't want to be petty, but just something. I know what kind of movement Kip McKean was starting when I was coming back to DC, and I wanted nothing to do with that. And granted that what Kip was doing was no longer ICOC, this is his brother. Yeah. And most people, for the most part, love their siblings. Yeah. And I didn't know how much of what Kip was doing had bled into what Randy was doing. Gotcha. And I wanted no part of that. And I won't repeat what Randy said because I don't. It was in confidence. But what he said basically reassured me that he and his brother are not the same person. He doesn't believe everything that his brother believes, and he's not going to do what his brother does. And I was comfortable with that, so I went to the Nova Church for a little while.
Gotcha. So that was you coming back after leaving the situation where, hey, everybody else is hanging out, they're not including me, and then when I go do my own thing to be constructive, somehow I get chastised for it. So you left then, and then this is your coming back. Is that right? Yes. Gotcha. How much? Because I was thinking of this, and I think I must have just missed what you said. What about how much time would you say passed between that leaving and coming back?
6 to 4 years.
About 4 years? Okay, cool. And I forget what made you want to start coming back when you went to where the kid's brother was Randy, right? Randy McKean.
Randy McKean. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I can count on one hand how many people have left and have positive experiences to share. I'm the only person I could think of that has positive things to say having left. And one of those things is there are certainly things I appreciated about the church in general. And one of those things, again, was the realness of conversation. I very much appreciated that. I appreciated that if you were really in a bind, somebody was gonna help you. And things like if I did and do enjoy Bible study, and if you want to be a Bible nerd and talk about that stuff, there's not a lot of people outside of like Masters of Divinity programs who can talk to you about Bible stuff if that's the kind of stuff you want to talk about. So I very much appreciated the church culture in that way. The relationships were number one, and so even on paper, doctrinally, I found that a lot of my personal theology aligned with what they believe, again, on paper. Now, in practice, what the ICOC was and is not necessarily what it is on paper. I do agree a lot with what's on paper, but you live practice. You don't live the paper. So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, so you came back, and I know you mentioned there's, on paper it looks good, in practice it doesn't. If you don't mind saying, what were some examples of like something you were like, this sounds good, this looks good, but you were executing this horribly?
Yeah. So I'm hedging because, as we've already discussed, like I was pretty like low tolerance for doing things that I disagreed with. And then I earned a reputation for that. And so I would talk to people who were basically in charge that would be like, maybe just be a little softer in your delivery of your defiance. but you can hang. I'm like, okay, well, I'll be softer.
I guess they knew you wasn't wrong, right?
I think yes. The older, more seasoned folks who had really kind of been through it understood, and I always, I believe, had a reasonable argument, and it wasn't just arguing to argue. Or I don't like this. It would be like make this make sense.
Yeah, because it's not making
right. Yeah. And I want to do something that makes sense. I don't want to do something just to do it.
Right.
And so I'm not going to call something a date if it's not a date. I'm not. It got to a point where after doing a lot more study on baptism, I basically came to the conclusion that I do think all Christians should be baptized.
Right.
I don't think you need to fully understand what that means or what it does.
Yeah.
And I'd spoken to enough people in the ICOC that were basically telling me, you have to believe. There are two parts of baptism. You have to believe that is what washes your sins away, and makes you eligible to be a Christian. And then B, you have to get baptized. So I can get down with you have to get baptized. You know, like Jesus got baptized.
Right.
Why would I not want to get baptized?
Right.
Like if my job is to be like Jesus and Jesus got baptized, that's pretty easy. I'm not allergic to water, so I'm going to do that.
Right.
But I was also thinking, you know, like a lot of things a lot of folks would do is they would try to. This happens in church, any church, all the time. People will have arguments on behalf of other people that aren't them. It's like, what about the Aborigine and this place? Yeah. I'm like, but you're not, and we're talking about you.
Yeah, what like about that person that's in the desert somewhere and there's no water around?
Yeah, and like that is a great philosophical question that we could talk about. But like right now we're talking about you.
Yeah,
and
there's water around.
You don't live. You're not Tom Hanks on an island with Wilson by yourself that's never heard the gospel. You're sitting right here with a Bible in your hand. So like, let's talk about that first, and then, but my point with that is I recognized that I don't know everything, and maybe there's some things I just don't understand correctly, or I'm misunderstanding them. Does that make me ineligible for heaven? And then I started thinking, is that the kind of God I want to worship? The kind of God that will punish me for genuinely not understanding some type of theological teaching.
Yeah.
And I could not accept that that's what kind of God is.
Yeah.
Assuming you believe in God in this conversation. So I would say that to people. I'm like, okay, well, you don't have to convince me. Like, I think people need to get baptized.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody's sticking point is, I don't believe that's what saves you, but I'm going to do it. Like, well, then why would you?
Right.
Like, I don't understand.
You have to believe that's what saves you. Otherwise, it's not valid.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a biblical scholar. I don't know a lot about the culture and education level of the people around Jesus in his lifetime. But my best guess is that the fishermen that were following him were probably not super educated.
Yeah.
Like, the Pharisees, pretty educated.
Right.
But there weren't any Pharisees that followed him when the sun was up.
True.
So, it was a bunch of fishermen, tax collector, some other cats. I don't know what all their vocations were. But my point is that, there were multiple times where they were like, it's printed there in the scripture where they would say, okay, Jesus, you just told us this parable or this truth. Mm. What does that mean?
Make it make sense, Jesus.
Yeah, they were like, what does this mean? Like, they clearly didn't understand what he was trying to tell them. So So the whole phrase is, what is Jesus, where he says, I'll say this plainly or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I'll say it plainly. It's like, yeah, do that, because some of us aren't that bright. So this isn't me trying to be self-deprecating. It's just me acknowledging that, like, I admit that there may be things that I don't understand, and if my salvation is totally dependent on me understanding for sure this theological concept, then I might be in trouble.
Yeah.
And to me, that doesn't seem right. I don't fully understand the physics of how planes fly. Mm. But I trust the physics.
Right.
And I'm going to get on this plane and go to Germany in September.
Imagine you getting to Germany safely, depending on you understanding exactly how planes work and why they're able to fly.
Yeah, if I had to fully understand the physics of planes flying, I would be in trouble. Y'all are gonna see me on the news in the ocean.
There we go.
Wow.
In
September.
All right. So came back again. I know you said you had a few off and on stints. What ultimately sealed the deal for you to be like, yeah, I'm good, I'm out?
That last story I told you about. So it basically boiled down to, I do think that if you call yourself a Christian, you should take it upon yourself to try to be better at it today than you were yesterday.
Right.
And so, what does that mean? Everybody's different. Mm-hmm. So what steps you need to take for you to take it more seriously? I think that's with anything in life you want to be better at. Mm-hmm. If you want to be the best skier or basketball player, you have to put in the work to be better today than you were yesterday. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, you're going to stagnate. Yeah. And I firmly believe that being a Christian is entirely too hard to mail it in. Like, if you're actually a Christian, it is hard work.
Yes.
Like, not cursing people out when you want to curse them out
that takes some restraint. Yeah.
It's like not maybe not for you, but like especially when I was in high school, like not just like getting 5-finger discounts in the gas station, like
right.
For some people, that's difficult to do. If you have I worked in a behavioral health facility for a little while, helping people get into treatment, substance abuse treatment, and so for folks like that, just saying no to their addiction it's a daily thing that you have to work on and get better at, and you can't be stagnant with that that goal of sobriety.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with Christianity. So it was the nail on the coffin was there. I'm doing my best to add more substantive knowledge about the Bible, about Christianity, to grow my understanding of what this is. and I'm learning and getting to a place where the ideas and beliefs that I'm settling on are incompatible with the official church stance.
Gotcha.
And so I just self-dismissed myself as opposed to being ex-fellowshipped and trying to maybe convince people.
Yeah.
And also I
do think silent exit, right?
Yeah, I do also think there's something to be said for being divisive, which is a big where they would use their...
Don't be divisive.
Yeah, and some people were legitimately divisive on issues, and I think some things like deserved a debate.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where there were some issues where I disagree on these things, and so let's sit down and have a discussion. And to the credit of the ministry leader that I was in at the time, we had some great conversations, very respectful, and no one asked me to leave. He didn't ask me to leave. He very much wanted me to stay, and as far as I know, it's a standing open invitation to come back if I ever want to decide to do that. But I had told him, I was like, this is where I've landed, and if you want me to teach other people what you're teaching them, I can't in good conscience do that.
Gotcha.
And if you don't want me to teach what I have come to learn is the proper thing, then maybe the best thing to do is for me to go elsewhere.
Gotcha. So basically what you had come to believe no longer aligned with what their hard stance was. So you're like, you know what? I'm gonna head out.
Yeah, and I think some people can make that sound ridiculous or excessive. But I think that's like that with basically anything in life. If you work for a major Fortune 500 company and they have a company line, your job working for them is to give the company line. Your personal opinion matters not.
Right.
If the PR representative comes up to you asking you questions, you know what I'm saying, or the news is interviewing you, if you're the communications professional for a congressional member, your job is to communicate your boss's opinions on issues, not your opinions on the issues. And so I get that. And if you can't do that, then you should leave. If you don't agree with the senator you work with and you can't keep repeating what that person is saying, then quit.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I was like, I can't in good conscience keep teaching and sharing with people what you're asking me to, and instead of making it a fight every single time, I think the respectful thing to do is just for me to leave.
You're gone. Cool. Yeah, and I'm hearing more and more of that lately. Whether it's specifically that, like, hey, I can in good conscience continue to teach what y'all want me to teach. I know of some people who are just like, yeah, you know what? This church served its purpose for me for a while, and it no longer does. Like I've outgrown it. Like a person, the quote. I think I'm quoting my man Aldo Martin. Shout out to you if you're watching. I think I'm quoting you when I say this, but I've outgrown. Like it's like a kid leaving the parents' house after they've grown enough. Like, you know what? I don't need it anymore. Like I've outgrown this.
Absolutely. I think there was a foundation of Christianity that I got there that I am not sure I would have gotten anywhere else. This is not me saying that the only place to get a good biblical Christian foundation is the ICOC.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I think for me and all the places that I had been, I was basically to the point where it's like there aren't really any real churches or good churches. They're just like full of people who act church on Sunday, and then the other 6 days of the week are out there getting loose.
Right.
And so, I mean, if that's the game, then that's the game. But I was able to see otherwise, and since have been to other churches that they have their own issues, but I have seen that there are people at other churches who are putting in real effort to be better today than they were yesterday.
Gotcha. Cool. So to kind of close out, what, if any, message would you have to someone, whether they've never been in ICOC, whether they're in there and they want to stay, or they're in there and they're thinking about leaving, or to someone who has left and is trying to make sense of things, trying to process, what would you tell? I know there's a lot of people in that message, but what would you say to any of those people?
This didn't come up, but you might find this interesting. When I left the Gainesville church, I was relatively young. I left quietly, on relatively good terms.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I became the unofficial check-in person for anybody thinking about leaving or that was leaving in Gainesville.
Nice.
Because I told you about the 16-person house. I stayed in the house. I didn't move out. I stayed there. So I was around all the time, hanging out with everybody, and all the time. I mean, basically, I was doing what I was doing before. It's just now we don't go to church together on Sundays and every other Friday night Bible study. And one of the things that frequently came up that made me really sad to hear was a lot of people would say to me, I'm concerned what that says about me as a Christian, or where my faith will be if I leave. Will I not be a Christian anymore if I stop going to church?
Yeah.
And the first thing I would always say to them is the fact that you're even asking that question means that you are in a good place spiritually.
Right.
Because people that don't care about Christianity or church anymore are not asking these kinds of questions.
They out.
They're just going to do what they're going to do, and that's fine. Like, I believe firmly that God affords all of us a choice with all of our life decisions, for better or for worse, and church leaders should do that too.
Yeah.
What right do you have to not allow me to have choices when God allows me choices, even if those choices end up hurting me, unfortunately?
Yeah.
So, I think if you're asking those kinds of questions, I think that's a good place to be. I think deeper than that, I hesitate to say more specific things because everybody's situation is a little bit different, and so I am a big proponent of nuance, and so what person A might need to hear or do is always going to be different from person B. So I guess the last thing I would contribute to that is, like, think deeply about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And even though one of the big very common lines at the church was to always get advice, and to not do anything where we're getting advice, I think there's value to there's some value to that for sure. And so talk to people that you trust.
Yeah.
And sometimes those people are outside of the church, and sometimes those people are just unchurched people.
Yeah.
But if they're people that care about you, they'll give you advice that hopefully you can trust.
Yeah.
If they really care about you.
Advice.
Not permission. Advice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Advice is good.
Yes.
When you're investing and you're not an investment banker, you should probably get some advice.
Right. Exactly. Cool. Before we head out, is there anything you got going on? Anything? Plug yourself, basically. Is there anything that you want the people to know? Anything you getting into? Anything you want put out there?
So there actually is. I wrote a children's book.
Nice.
It is dedicated to all pandemic parents. Is this channel rated PG-13?
Ain't rated nothing right now. Well, it's not. It's okay. Anything below NC-17 is. I had to stop. I'm like, I don't think you're going there, but like, let me. So I'd be lying if for sure, and everybody would call me out if I said it wasn't inspired by the children's book Go to Sleep. Yes, that book.
It's definitely inspired by that, but the name of the book is called Sit Your Ass Down.
We make so much fuss about pandemic babies, but I love the fact you said the pandemic parents. That's the other side of that.
Everybody that's had to have either your roommates, your spouse, or your kids that are driving you crazy while you're trying to work from home, and you just want them to shut up and go sit their ass down somewhere. Even if you don't have kids, the book is for you.
Go get that. I ain't even ready yet. I'm already on board. Yes. Go cop that. For real. Ron, thank you so much for taking time to do this with me. I know we've been geeking out all weekend, and we could have just been like, you know what, let's do this another time. But I appreciate you taking time to do this, because people, whether they have had positive experiences, whether if it was a mixed bag, or you had an experience where like it was hell, I was there, and ain't no way I'm going back. All these voices count. All these voices help. So yeah, like I said on Auto's channel once, the more the merrier. People need to see all these different angles of it. Because there's a lot of people out there still trying to make sense of what the hell happened in their life for however long they were there, all that good stuff. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you guys for hanging on forever how long this video ends up being after I edit it all. And I will see y'all at the next video. Peace.